The night is dark and echoing with vampires.
There is a version of this story where everyone survives. In that version, the plan works exactly the way Elena Gilbert designed it. Imperfect, jury-rigged, barely functional, but functional enough. Mikael serves his purpose. The trap closes. Klaus is lured, contained, threatened sufficiently that he retreats, or bargains, or simply understands that Mystic Falls has become too expensive a problem to keep paying for. In that version, Damon Salvatore stands in the Lockwood foyer with the white oak stake in his hand, and he makes the same calculation he always makes: weight the win against the cost, measure the risk against the reward. And he stops. He stops because Stefan catches his arm. He stops because Elena steps in front of him. He stops because even Damon, in his worst and most reckless moments, has a version of the future he is trying to protect. And he can feel, in that version of the story, that the future is balanced on this exact second, and he does not want to be the one who tips it wrong. That is the version where everyone survives. This is not that version. This is the version where the plan works too well, where the moment opens cleaner than anyone expected, where Mikael's distraction is more effective than the plan required, where Klaus is exposed for 3 full seconds with no hybrid within reach, and the white oak stake is already in Damon's hand, and Damon Salvatore, who has been watching Klaus Mikaelson exist for 3 seasons and counting the cost of that existence in people he loves, does not stop. This is the version where Damon closes the distance, and everything changes. The plan going into the homecoming dance is this: Mikael is a weapon, and Damon is the one holding him. It is not a comfortable arrangement. Mikael, the original vampire hunter, the father of the originals, the 1,000-year obsession that Klaus has been running from since before most civilizations had written language, is not the kind of weapon you hold comfortably. He is the kind of weapon you hold carefully, with both hands, knowing that if your grip slips for even a moment, the danger doesn't disappear, it redirects. He has made it very clear, in that cold and absolute way of his, that his tolerance for the Salvatores extends exactly as far as their usefulness against Klaus, and not 1 inch beyond. He refers to Stefan and Damon the way a man might refer to rats he has borrowed from a laboratory, useful for now, irrelevant after. He is not pretending to be an ally. He is simply a force that has been aimed, temporarily, at the same target. Damon understands this. Damon has understood it from the beginning. It is, in fact, one of the reasons he respects the arrangement. There is no false warmth here, no pretense, just 2 parties who want the same thing for entirely different reasons, pointing themselves at the same wall. Damon can work with that. Damon has spent 150 years working with worse. The Lockwood house is full of hybrids when Damon arrives. This is also part of the plan. Klaus has brought his hybrids, his personally sired supernatural army, to what he believes is his triumphant return to Mystic Falls, to a party thrown in his honor by people who had no choice but to throw it. He is comfortable. He is surrounded by creatures who exist because of his blood and who will die to protect it. He is, in the specific way that 1,000-year-old apex predators sometimes are, not quite as vigilant as he would be in unfamiliar territory. That is the window. That is what Mikael is here to create. Distraction, chaos, a gap in Klaus's defensive perimeter that is wide enough for exactly 1 person to walk through. The party moves the way parties in Mystic Falls always move. Quickly, violently, with the decorative elements of normal teenage life serving as paper-thin cover for the supernatural machinery underneath. There are streamers. There is music. There are people in formal wear who are either unaware of what is happening around them, or have learned, in the particular way that Mystic Falls residents learn things, to not ask questions about the parts of the evening that feel wrong. Mikael creates his distraction at 11:47 p.m. It is effective, more effective than the plan strictly required, which is the kind of small divergence from expectation that rewrites everything downstream. The hybrids are pulled in the wrong direction. 3 of them, then 5, then the rest moving like a current drawn toward a drain, leaving Klaus standing in the Lockwood foyer with his back to the wrong side of the room for precisely 3 seconds. 3 seconds. Stefan is running before Damon moves. Stefan has been watching Damon all night the way you watch a fuse. Not the explosive, the fuse, the thing that is going to determine whether the explosive goes off or gets diffused. And Stefan knows. He knows with the certainty of 150 years of knowing his brother, that Damon has been doing math in his head all evening. Stefan has been doing the same math and arriving at different conclusions and trying, across the noise of the party and the chaos of the plan, to communicate those conclusions to his brother through sheer proximity, Stay the course. Let the plan work as designed. Don't do what you're thinking about doing. But the moment opens, and it is too clean, and Stefan is 20 feet too far away. The white oak stake is already in Damon's hand. It has been in his hand all evening, because Damon Salvatore does not hold a weapon he intends to use and forget about it. He has been holding it the way you hold something you are absolutely certain you will need tonight. And the moment Klaus's hybrids clear the space between them, the calculation happens faster than thinking. This is the thing about Damon Salvatore that people who don't know him well tend to misread. They see the impulsivity and they call it recklessness. They see the speed and they call it thoughtlessness. But that is not what this is. What this is a man who has been thinking about this moment since the first time Klaus touched someone Damon loved, who has run the cost-benefit analysis so many times that the conclusion has become something like instinct. And instinct, when the moment arrives, is faster than conscious decision. He closes the distance. Klaus turns at the last second, not fast enough, not by far, but fast enough to see it coming, fast enough for his face to register something that is not quite fear, because Klaus Mikaelson has not experienced genuine fear in centuries, but something adjacent to it, something that is the 1,000-year-old vampire's equivalent of surprise, the understanding that he is miscalculated somewhere, that this specific scenario, this specific person, this specific 3-second window, he didn't account for this. The white oak stake goes in clean. It is not cinematic. It is not slow. There is no final speech, no last exchange of meaningful dialogue, no moment where Klaus looks into Damon's eyes and imparts some piece of ancient wisdom that recontextualizes everything. It is fast and it is final, and it is the most anticlimactic possible ending for the most feared creature in 1,000 years of supernatural history. Klaus Mikaelson looks down at his own chest. He looks at the stake protruding from it with an expression that takes approximately 1 second to cycle through. Disbelief first, then something that might be calculation, might be the ancient mind trying to find a solution to an insoluble problem, and then, finally, underneath all of that, something that is simply and humanly, no. Then he looks at Damon, then he burns. Not gradually, not cinematically, not the way the show always implied it might go, with a long dissolution and a meaningful final moment. He burns the way only truly dead things burn, completely, immediately, from the inside out, as if whatever magical architecture has been sustaining Klaus Mikaelson for 1,000 years simply stops, and without that sustained effort, physics collects its debt in seconds. The fire does not come from outside him, it comes from him, from the center of whatever he is, from the point where Mikhail's ancient enemy and Esther's worst creation and 1,000 years of running and killing and surviving intersect with a piece of white oak, and it consumes him completely. The ash settles. There is a moment of absolute silence in the Lockwood foyer. The music from the other rooms is still audible. Someone laughs at something 3 rooms away in the ordinary civilian section of the party that has no idea what just happened. 20 feet to its left, the streamers hang. The air smells like something old and something burned. Stefan Salvatore arrives in the doorway 3 seconds later. He stands there. He takes in the ash. He takes in Damon still holding the white oak stake, which is no longer burning because there is nothing left for it to burn. Standing in the center of the room with the particular stillness of someone who has just done something enormous and is waiting for the weight of it to arrive. To the left, Mikhail stands motionless. He exhales once. It is not a sound of satisfaction. It is the specific sound of a man setting down something extraordinarily heavy. Not relief exactly, because a man who has been carrying a weight for 1,000 years does not simply feel relief when he puts it down. He feels the disorientation of a body that no longer knows what to do without the familiar pressure. Mikhail has been the hunter for longer than most civilizations have existed. The quarry is gone. The hunt is over. His face, briefly, is the face of a man who does not know who he is without his purpose. Then it closes. It goes back to the cold and the distance and the contempt that is Mikhail's default setting, and he looks at Damon, and there is nothing legible in that look except the faint implication that the evaluation is ongoing, that Damon Salvatore has just proved himself useful in the most complete possible way, and that the question of what a man like Mikhail does with a person who has served his purpose is a question that Damon should perhaps be thinking about. He does not think about it. Not right now. Stefan's voice is very quiet when he speaks. His face is not celebratory. His face is the face of a man watching someone light a fuse. Not a firecracker fuse, not a controlled burn fuse, but the kind of fuse attached to something so large that the blast radius is still being calculated. He has been doing the math all night. He is doing it faster now. The numbers are not good. "What did you do?" Stefan says. It is not a question. The champagne is Elena's idea. This is important to understand, not as an indictment, not as evidence of some failure of judgment on Elena Gilbert's part, but as a portrait of what it looks like to survive something you have been surviving for 3 years. Elena has been living inside the Klaus problem since season 1. She has watched it consume people she loves. She has watched it restructure every plan, derail every future, cost every person in her orbit something irreplaceable. She has spent 3 years being the doppelganger, the leverage, the blood bag, the sacrifice, the currency in a supernatural negotiation she never agreed to enter. And tonight, for the first time in 3 years, the thing that has been holding them all hostage is ash on the Lockwood estate floor. The champagne is not stupidity. The champagne is 3 years of being afraid, suddenly permitted to breathe. But Elena is also, underneath the relief, watching Damon's face. Not because she doesn't trust him, but because Damon's face is the most honest thing about him. When he's performing, the performance is in his body language, in his delivery, in the theatrical scaffolding of Damon Salvatore. His face is where the actual emotion lives, and she has learned to read it over 3 years of proximity that neither of them has been fully honest about. Damon is sprawled on the couch the way he sprawls when a problem has been solved. Not relaxed. Damon is never truly relaxed, but discharged, the kinetic tension of the evening converted into something that looks like ease, like a man who has completed the math and is satisfied with the answer. He has a drink. He has the specific expression of someone who has been right about something and is allowing himself, briefly and without public declaration, to feel vindicated about it. He is not thinking about sire lines. He is thinking about Klaus being dead and Elena's hand in his, and a version of the future that does not have a 1,000-year-old original hybrid standing between him and every good thing he is trying to protect. He is thinking about what it means that the threat they have been living inside for 3 years is simply, finally over. Stefan is not drinking. This is the detail that matters. Stefan has been offered the champagne and he has declined it, quietly and without explanation, and he is standing at the window with his phone in his hand and his face doing something that has nothing to do with the party atmosphere Elena and Caroline are trying to sustain in the boarding house living room. Stefan's face is doing math. It has been doing math since the moment the stake went in. It was doing math at the Lockwood estate while Damon stood in the ash and Mikael made his cold departure. It is doing increasingly urgent math right now, because Stefan was turned by a vampire in Klaus's bloodline. Stefan knows this. Stefan has always known this. And he is standing at the window searching something on his phone, and the results are not improving his expression. The thing about Stefan Salvatore is that he processes catastrophe differently than Damon. Damon processes catastrophe as it arrives, violently and completely, converting horror into action because stillness is the thing he cannot survive. Stefan processes it in advance. He runs the scenario forward, projects the consequences, arrives at the worst possible outcome before it materializes, and then stands very still with the weight of it while he decides what to do. This is the quality that makes Stefan, functionally, the more strategically competent of the two brothers. It is also the quality that makes him, in moments like this, one, the person in the room who looks most like a man watching a disaster approach from a distance he cannot close. The call from Catherine Pierce comes at 12:43 in the morning. Catherine's calls always arrive with a kind of managed performance, the projection of composure, the precisely calibrated reveal, the centuries-old habit of presenting information in exactly the way that will cause the maximum useful effect. Catherine Pierce does not simply tell you things, she deploys them. This call is different. The call connects and the first thing they hear is crying. Not distressed crying, not the hyperventilating, panicked crying of someone in immediate danger, not the gasping, performative crying that Catherine uses when it serves her. This is something rawer and more fundamental than any of that. This is the overwhelmed, exhausted, disbelieving crying of someone who has been running for 500 years and has just, for the first time in all of those years, stopped moving. There is genuine shock underneath it, the kind of shock that hits you when a threat you have been living inside for so long that it has become the architecture of your existence simply ceases to exist. The body doesn't know what to do. The nervous system has been calibrated for constant evasion for 5 centuries, and the removal of the thing it has been evading does not feel like freedom immediately. It feels like freefall. He's dead, Catherine says, between the crying, but solid enough to be certain he's actually dead. Elena watches Damon's face during this. She watches him hear Catherine Pierce, 500 years of survival, 500 years of running, 500 years of building and rebuilding and escaping, and she watches him hear the relief underneath the tears, the stunned and genuine relief of someone who has just been given back a future they had long since stopped believing they had access to. She watches him smile. "I can go anywhere," Catherine says. "I can go anywhere, and he cannot follow me." Elena knows Damon well enough to know the difference, and this is not performance. This is Damon Salvatore hearing the immediate good he has done and allowing himself to feel it. He glances at Elena. There is something in his face that is asking her to see this, to see what it means that Catherine Pierce, who has been the most relentlessly self-preserving organism in the supernatural world for 5 centuries, is crying with relief. He is not thinking about sire lines. Stefan's voice, when it comes, is very quiet. "Damon, the room holds when Finn died." Stefan's voice has the specific, controlled quality of someone managing a significant amount of fear by converting it into precision. "Do you remember what happened to Sage?" The silence that follows is a different kind of silence than the one at the Lockwood estate. That silence was the silence after an action, the held breath of consequence, waiting to announce itself. This silence is the silence of understanding arriving. It is the silence of a room full of people doing math simultaneously and arriving at different speeds at the same terrible answer. Elena sets down the champagne. Damon doesn't move. He is still on the couch. He is very still in a way that looks like composure, and is actually the specific stillness of someone who has just been handed a piece of information that is restructuring everything they thought they understood about the last 3 hours. Sage died within the hour when Finn was staked. Sage, who had been turned by Finn roughly 900 years prior, who was the vampire Finn had created during his centuries of supernatural existence. Sage dropped dead approximately 1 hour after her original died. Troy, a vampire Sage had turned, died shortly after Sage. The deaths cascaded down the bloodline with a delay that was proportional to the distance from the original, measured not in geography but in the chain of creation. How many vampires down the line you were from the source? Stefan is in Klaus's bloodline. He knows this. He has always known this. It has been an ambient, theoretical danger for years. The kind of danger you acknowledge, and then set aside because it is too enormous to keep an active focus while you were dealing with the more immediate problem of Klaus himself still being alive. Klaus is not alive. Klaus has been ash on the Lockwood estate floor for approximately 45 minutes. The clock, they will realize later, started the moment the stake went in. It started at the moment of Klaus's death, and it has been running ever since. And every minute that has passed in the false warmth of the boarding house with the champagne and the relief and the not thinking has been a minute subtracted from the window they have to do something about what Damon Salvatore has done. Elena looks at Stefan. Stefan looks at Damon. Damon looks at his hands on the phone. Distantly, Catherine Pierce is still crying. Caroline Forbes has been checking her phone every 4 minutes since she got home. This is not anxiety. This is mathematics. Tyler was the bait tonight. This was the plan. Tyler positioned inside the Lockwood estate surrounded by Klaus's hybrids, serving as the element of the trap that made the rest of it functional. And Caroline has understood since the moment the plan was finalized that Tyler's role was the most dangerous one, and that the margin for error was thin. She's been checking her phone because Tyler has not called. And Tyler knows he is supposed to call, and the not calling has been building since 11:30 p.m. into something that is sitting in her chest and getting heavier. She is in her bedroom. The homecoming dress is still on. She has not been able to change. Changing would mean accepting that the evening is over, and the evening is not over until Tyler calls, and Tyler has not called. Her phone rings at 1:15 in the morning. She answers it before the first ring completes. Tyler, this is the first thing she registers. He is there, the call has connected, he is on the other end of the line, and he is breathing. And for exactly half a second, she allows herself the relief of that. He's there. He's alive. Whatever happened tonight, he is alive and breathing and calling her. Then she processes the breathing. It is wrong. Not wrong the way breathing is wrong when someone has been running. Not wrong the way breathing sounds after a fight or a fear. Wrong in a way that she does not have the vocabulary for yet. Wrong in the way that something sounds when the machine producing it is not functioning correctly. Labored in a way that is not exertion. Wet in a way that is not illness. Irregular in a way that is not panic. Tyler. Her voice is steady because she makes it steady. Where are you? He doesn't answer the question. He makes a sound that might have been intended as an answer and becomes something else. She drives to the Lockwood estate in under 4 minutes. Later, she will not remember the drive itself, the route, the turns, the traffic, none of it, because her entire consciousness has been narrowed to the call, which she kept open on speaker on the passenger seat, and the sounds Tyler was making on the other end of it, and the distance between her and those sounds. She finds him in the kitchen. Tyler Lockwood is braced against the kitchen counter with both hands, one pressed flat against the surface, and one pressed against his chest, over his sternum, as if he is trying to hold something in place through sheer pressure. He is upright. He is still upright, which she will later identify as the thing that made it worse. The standing, the remaining vertical, the refusal to go down despite whatever is happening inside him, the specific Lockwood stubbornness that she has argued with and appreciated and depended on, applied here at the absolute worst possible time. His eyes are wrong. She knows his eyes. She knows the hybrid gold that moves through them when his control slips or his emotions run hot. She knows every version of Tyler Lockwood's eyes that exists, and what she is looking at right now is none of those versions. The gold is there, yes, but it is bleeding into something else. Not darkening the way it darkens when he is angry, but fragmenting, like a color that has lost its internal coherence. Like a light source that is going out. This is system failure. She does not have the exact words for what she is seeing, but she has the instinct, and the instinct says, system failure. Care. Just that, her name, once, with the last of the energy available to him for speech. She crosses the kitchen in the time it takes him to exhale. She has her arms around him before he goes down, which means she is the reason he doesn't hit the floor. She catches the weight of him, and she goes down with it, controlled. Careful, her knees absorbing the impact on the Lockwood kitchen tile, and she lowers him and she doesn't let go. She puts her hands on his face. His skin is wrong under her fingers. Not just the cold, not the specific cold that every vampire learns about themselves over time, but a deeper cold, a cold that is moving, spreading, the cold of something that is receding rather than present. Tyler. She says his name. She says it again. She says it the way you say someone's name when you are trying to locate them, when you are trying to be a sound they can navigate toward, when all the other options have narrowed and your voice is the only tool left. She keeps saying it. His pulse does something under her fingers that she will spend years trying not to remember. It does not slow the way a pulse slows when someone is losing blood, or fading from a wound, or going under anesthetic. Those are gradual processes with gradual sounds. This is different. This is the pulse of a hybrid, the dual-natured, Klaus-sired wolf and vampire existence of Tyler Lockwood, and it stops the way things stop when both components cease simultaneously, not gradually, conclusively. Tyler Lockwood dies at 1:31 in the morning. He desiccates quickly. This is the difference between a hybrid's death and a standard vampire's death. A standard vampire in the process of desiccation has the vampire's extended resistance to offer some buffer, some prolonged deterioration before the final point. A hybrid has two natures, and the wolf side of that nature has no such buffer. The wolf does not desiccate, it simply stops. And when the wolf stops, the vampire follows, and the process is fast and complete, in a way that Caroline, who has seen vampires die before, is not prepared for. His body does not gradually fade, it concludes. Caroline Forbes sits on the kitchen floor of the Lockwood estate. She sits for 6 minutes. This is not shock. It is not the frozen, unresponsive shock of someone who has left the present moment. She is entirely present. She is looking at Tyler, and she is letting the reality of what she is looking at be what it is, which is the only thing she knows how to do with things that cannot be fixed. She is letting it be real. Then her hands begin to shake. She notices this as a separate phenomenon from the grief. The grief is enormous, and it is here, it is fully here. It is going to be here for a very long time. But the shaking is something else. She holds her hands up, in front of her face, in the particular way you do when you are trying to determine whether what you are observing is real or imagined. Her hands are visible in the kitchen light. They are shaking with a quality that is not emotional, not the trembling of someone crying, not the shaking of someone in shock. This is a different register, a cellular register. She has been a vampire for less than a year. She is still learning the language of what her body tells her, still building the vocabulary of supernatural sensation that older vampires take for granted. She does not yet have a clean name for what she is feeling, but she is always cold. Her phone rings. Stefan's voice on the other end of it is controlled in the way Stefan's voice gets, when he is very frightened and is converting the fear into precision, because precision is the only thing available to him. She has heard this voice before. She heard it when Damon was dying from a werewolf bite. She heard it when Elena was in danger. She has learned over time that Stefan's controlled voice is scarier than most people's panicked voices, because Stefan only becomes controlled when the situation is past a threshold he cannot manage openly. Caroline, a breath. Listen to me very carefully. She is on the kitchen floor of the Lockwood estate, next to Tyler's body, with her shaking hands held in front of her face, and she is listening to every word Stefan Salvatore says. Where are you right now? The question is not how are you, it is not are you safe, it is not what happened, it is where are you? Because Stefan needs a location, and the reason Stefan needs a location is because Stefan is coming to her, and the reason Stefan is coming to her is because whatever has happened tonight is not finished, and she is part of it and he needs to reach her before the next thing begins. She tells him where she is. In the silence that follows, the 2 seconds between her answer and his next sentence, she hears it in his breathing. The same wrongness she heard in Tyler's breathing, less advanced, but present. The same quality of something that is not functioning correctly underneath the surface of the sound. Don't drive, Stefan says. Stay exactly where you are. We're coming to you. Stefan, her voice is very quiet. What is happening to me? He doesn't answer immediately. 1 second. 2. Damon killed Klaus tonight. She doesn't speak. She looks at her hands. Caroline. The sire line when an original dies. His bloodline dies with him. She hears herself saying it. She knows this. She has always known this, in the abstract, as a piece of supernatural theory that existed in the distance, a rule of the universe that she acknowledged and did not spend time thinking about, because Klaus had always been the immediate problem and the sire line was the hypothetical downstream disaster, and you do not spend time worrying about the hypothetical downstream disaster when you are in the middle of the immediate problem. Klaus is not the immediate problem anymore. She looks at Tyler. Stefan is still talking. She hears the words without fully processing them. The information about Bonnie, about the boarding house, about the timeline they are working inside. But what she's actually doing is looking at Tyler, who died 16 minutes ago. Who died the way a hybrid dies when its creator is staked? Who died the way every creature directly sired by Klaus's blood would die? Fast and first and without the buffer the rest of them have. Tyler was the alarm bell. That is what she understands. Sitting on the kitchen floor with her shaking hands and Stefan's voice in her ear and the cold moving through her like a tide. Tyler was the first proof that something was catastrophically wrong. He died before anyone fully understood what was coming. He died before anyone could stop it. He died on his kitchen floor, alone except for her, with his hand pressed against his chest and his hybrid gold eyes fragmenting. And he will not be the last one to die tonight unless something changes very quickly. I'm staying here, she says. She cuts Stefan off. I'm staying right here and I'm not leaving him alone on this floor. You come to me. She hears him making the calculation, hears the specific texture of Stefan Salvatore refusing to lie to her when she has asked him a direct question, which he has always, even at his worst, extended to her as a form of respect. Sage died within an hour of Finn being staked, Stefan says. She was directly turned by Finn. We're further down the chain. That buys us time. A few hours. Maybe, Caroline, how long has the clock been running? The silence this time is the silence of a man who has already done this math and does not want to deliver the answer. Since the stake went in, he says, just under 2 hours ago. She closes her eyes. She opens them. She looks at her hands, still shaking, the cold still moving, the gray that she does not yet know to call gray beginning at the edges of her in ways she can feel but cannot see. Get Bonnie, she says. We're already trying. Stefan, 1 beat. Get Bonnie now. She hangs up. She sits with Tyler for a moment longer. Not because there is anything she can do for him now, but because he is Tyler, and the floor of his kitchen is not where he should be, and she is not willing to leave him without sitting with that for 1 more minute. She puts her hand over his, which is cold and still, and she allows herself exactly 60 seconds of grief before she stands up. Because Caroline Forbes has always been the person who stands up. The shaking doesn't stop. The cold doesn't stop. The tide of it keeps moving through her, slow and certain the way consequences move. Not urgently, not dramatically, but with the absolute confidence of something that has all the time in the world, because time is the thing it is running on. The sireline curse is not afraid of her. It does not know her. It does not know that she is going to stand up in this kitchen and walk out to her car and drive to the boarding house and find Bonnie Bennett and make this stop. It does not know any of that, but it is going to find out. She turns off the kitchen light. It feels wrong to leave it on. She doesn't know why. She walks out of the Lockwood Estate kitchen and she gets into her car, and she does not look in the rearview mirror as she pulls out of the driveway, because the one thing she cannot afford right now, the one thing that will take her completely apart if she allows it access, is another look at Tyler Lockwood on his kitchen floor. She drives behind her. In the Lockwood Estate, the kitchen is dark. The streamers from the homecoming dance are visible through the window, colored and still, moving slightly in a draft from the open back door that nobody has closed. The house is quiet. The house is the specific quiet of a place where something irreversible has just happened, and the walls have not yet decided what to do with it. At the Salvatore boarding house, Stefan is standing at the window with his phone and his math, and a gray that is beginning, just the first suggestion, at his temples. At a motel somewhere outside Atlanta, Catherine Pierce has stopped crying and started coughing. And in the kitchen of the boarding house, Elena Gilbert is dialing Bonnie Bennett for the third time, standing very still in the way she stands when she has run out of things to say, and the only thing left is to keep moving. The clock has been running for 2 hours. They have, at most, 4 left. Catherine Pierce is 537 years old, and she has spent most of those years being right about things that other people did not want to hear. She was right about Klaus coming for her in 1492, and she ran when everyone told her to stay. She was right about the Salvatore's attachment to Elena being a liability when the entire town was still pretending it was a manageable complication. She was right about Mystic Falls being the single most dangerous concentration of supernatural activity in the continental United States, and she said so, repeatedly, to people who had planted themselves in the middle of it and seemed surprised every time something tried to kill them. Catherine Pierce has built 500 years of survival on a very simple operational principle. Know what is true before it arrives. Do not wait for confirmation. Do not wait for certainty. Know it first and move. She is calling at 1:45 in the morning because she is known for approximately 20 minutes, and 20 minutes was how long it took her to move from the initial shock of Klaus's death into the calculation of what his death means. And the calculation has produced a result that is currently working its way through her body in real time. She is no longer crying. The crying lasted approximately 8 minutes. 8 minutes of genuine, overwhelmed, 5 centuries earned relief. The first honest tears Catherine Pierce has produced since before she had a plan for everything. And then the coughing started, and the crying stopped. Because Catherine Pierce does not cry when she is in danger. She converts. The cough is wrong in a way she has never experienced before, and Catherine has experienced a considerable range of supernatural wrongness over 5 centuries. It is deep and wet, and doing something to her voice that coughs do not do to vampire voices, because vampire physiology does not produce coughs like this. Vampires don't get sick. Vampires don't deteriorate from the inside the way humans do. Vampire bodies are fixed at the point of their creation, and that fixedness is the whole point of what they are. But Catherine was created from Klaus's bloodline, and Klaus's bloodline is dying. What is happening to Catherine Pierce right now is not illness. It is time. 5 centuries of biological time that her vampire nature has been suspending, holding in abeyance, refusing to allow to settle. 5 centuries of age that has been waiting with the patience that only mathematics possesses, for the moment when the supernatural mechanism holding it back stopped functioning. That mechanism is Klaus. Klaus is ash on the Lockwood Estate floor. And the time, 537 years of it, is trying to collect all at once. She has aged a decade in 20 minutes. She can feel it in the mirror she is not looking at, in the skin of her hands and the quality of her voice when she coughs. She is aging at a rate that makes the geometry of her remaining window terrifyingly clear. Sire line, she says, between coughs, but solid. The word lands in the boarding house living room like a stone dropped into still water, and the ripples reach every corner before she says another word. Damon is very still on the couch. He has not moved since Stefan said Sage's name. He has been doing the same math Stefan was doing at the window, and he has been arriving at the same answer from a different direction. And the answer has been sitting in him for the last 12 minutes like something he swallowed wrong. Klaus's bloodline, Catherine continues. Her voice has roughened. Not much, but enough to be noticeable to the people who know her voice. If Klaus dies, his bloodline dies. All of it. The entire chain from the first vampire he ever turned to the last one he turned last week. The bond between an original and his line is not metaphorical. It is physical. It is the literal mechanism of what we are. She coughs again. It takes longer this time. I'm in it, she says, which means you're in it. She is looking at Damon somehow across the phone line. He can feel it. The specific quality of Catherine Pierce's attention when she is watching him understand it, which means Stefan's in it. Elena is standing at the window. She has moved there without realizing it, sometime in the last 40 seconds. While Catherine was talking, Elena's body made the decision to put distance between itself and the center of the room. And now she is looking out at Mystic Falls. And it is dark and quiet out there, and it looks exactly the same as it always looks, and she cannot make it look different no matter how differently she now knows it to be. Somewhere out there across town, 12 hybrids are dying. 12 creatures that Klaus made with his blood, that exist because of his blood, that are connected to him with a bond that is more direct and more absolute than the standard sire line chain. They are expiring right now, in the dark, in whatever corners of Mystic Falls they have been distributed through. She cannot see it, she cannot hear it, but it is happening, and it has been happening for the last 2 hours. And the same mechanism that is killing the hybrids is running through the bloodline chain toward Stefan and Caroline and Tyler, who is already dead on his kitchen floor, and toward Damon, and toward Catherine on the phone, and toward every vampire Klaus ever made, or whose making traced back to him. Tyler's already dead, isn't he? Catherine says. It is not a question. Damon doesn't answer. Catherine accepts it with a sound that is not grief. Catherine Pierce does not grieve Tyler Lockwood, does not have that particular relationship with him, but something that might be recognition. The acknowledgement of a data point, the confirmation that the timeline she is calculating is operating exactly as fast as she knew it was. How long, Damon says. It is the first thing he has said since Stefan mentioned Sage's name. His voice is level in the way voices are level when the person using them has made the decision to be useful rather than to feel anything about the situation, until there is time to feel things. This is Damon at his most functional, not the performative Damon, not the reckless Damon, but the one who emerges in genuine crises, who has been surviving for 150 years and knows what that requires. Catherine thinks. He hears her thinking, here's the specific quality of Catherine Pierce doing mathematics she would prefer not to be doing. Sage died within the hour when Finn was staked, she says. She was directly turned by Finn. I have been running for 20 minutes since Klaus died, and I already look like I'm 80. Another cough. Stefan and Caroline have more time. They're further down the chain. The distance from the original adds a buffer. The curse has to travel the bloodline before it reaches them. It's already reached me because... She stops, recalibrates, because I'm close enough in the chain that the buffer is thin. And me, Damon says, the silence that follows is the specific silence of someone who has information they are not certain about and who is unwilling to state uncertainty as fact. I don't know where you are in the chain, Damon, Catherine says. That's the problem. I don't know how far down you fall from Klaus's original turning. Your line traces back through me. I was turned by a vampire in Klaus's line, which means you were turned by a vampire in Klaus's line, which means you're in it. But the exact distance, she stops. I don't know. That's the honest answer. I don't know how much time you have. She looks at Damon, at his hands, which he is looking at, which are his hands right now, which are simply his hands with no gray and no wrongness, and no visible evidence of the clock running underneath the surface of his skin. But the clock is running. She knows it is running. She has known it was running since Stefan said Sage's name. She looks at Damon for 1 second. She takes in everything she knows about him. 150 years of survival, 3 seasons of impossible situations, every version of Damon Salvatore she has encountered and argued with and been afraid of and for, and the specific complicated truth of what she feels about him that she has never fully said out loud. She takes all of that in 1 second. Then she says, Bonnie. That is all. Just the name, because there is only one option, and everyone in this room already knows it, and the only function of saying it out loud is to convert the knowing into moving. Stefan is already dialing. The Salvatore boarding house. Night. Hour 3. Caroline Forbes arrives at the boarding house at 2:08 in the morning, and Stefan Salvatore meets her at the door and says, You drove yourself? And she says, That's good. That means you still have motor function. That's a good sign, in the tightest, most controlled voice she has ever heard from him. She looks at him. She takes him in properly, in the light of the boarding house doorway, in a way she has not been able to do over the phone. Stefan Salvatore is one of the most physically consistent people she knows, not because he is unchanging, but because the changes to him always operate on an internal register, in the set of his jaw or the stillness of his posture. And the external surface tends to hold regardless of what the interior is doing. She has learned to read the interior from the subtle exterior tells. Right now, the exterior is telling her everything. The gray at his temples is not dramatic. It is the first suggestion of something, a tone, a quality, like the early light of a winter morning that has not quite committed to being morning yet. It starts at the hairline and it extends perhaps 2 centimeters toward his ears. Most people in the room would not notice it. Caroline notices it because Caroline notices everything, and because she knows what she is looking for. She walks past him into the boarding house. The hallway has a mirror. The boarding house has always had mirrors. This is a point of ongoing low-level irony in a building occupied primarily by vampires. But Damon has never cared about the irony, and the mirrors have stayed. Caroline stops in front of this one. She stands in the hallway light and she looks at herself. The dress is still on. The homecoming dress. The one she picked because it was beautiful, and the occasion called for beauty even when the occasion was a trap. Even when the occasion was Damon Salvatore planning to lure the most dangerous creature in supernatural history into a house full of his own hybrids. She looks at herself in this dress, under this light. The gray does not live in her skin yet. It is not a color she can identify in the mirror, not exactly. Not a visible tone that she can point to and name. What she can identify is a quality. Something in the quality of her presence, in the way the light is catching her, as if the reflection is doing something a reflection should not do, as if the photograph is very slightly, very early beginning to fade. She is still there. She is fully there. But there is an edge to her, a peripheral suggestion, a sense of someone who was three-dimensional and is very slowly, in the manner of things that happen so gradually you don't notice them until they're half done, beginning to lose a dimension. She puts her hand flat against the mirror glass. The glass is room temperature. Her hand is colder than room temperature. She is always colder than room temperature. This is what being a vampire means. She has understood this since the night she woke up in the hospital bed, and the world was different. But this cold is different from the baseline cold. This cold is moving. There is directionality to it, a quality of advance, as if it is coming from somewhere and heading somewhere, and she is simply the landscape it is crossing. She keeps her hand on the glass for 3 seconds. Then she goes to find Elena. Elena is on the phone with Bonnie. She has been on the phone with Bonnie, or trying to be, or leaving voicemails, or waiting for callbacks for most of the time since Stefan first said Sage's name. Bonnie Bennett is not the kind of person who ignores calls in a crisis, but Bonnie Bennett is also not always reachable. And the minutes spent in the gap between call and answer have been some of the worst minutes of Elena Gilbert's evening, which has contained a number of strong competitors for that title. Bonnie answered on the 3rd try. The first thing that comes through the phone when Bonnie speaks is not alarm. People who do not know Bonnie Bennett well tend to expect alarm. She is, by the metrics of her life, a person who has been in enough crises to have calibrated alarm as a default setting, and they expect the crisis news to produce it. What Bonnie produces instead when Elena tells her what has happened is silence, a specific kind of silence that is not emptiness but density, the silence of a person who is already thinking, who has already begun the interior work of figuring out what is possible in the time available. Then the thinking becomes audible, and this is the point at which Bonnie Bennett goes from being a person Elena is calling for help to being the most important person in the supernatural world. A sireline severance spell, Bonnie says. Not as a question, as a category. She is placing it. Bonnie, does that exist? Elena asks. Not in any grimoire I have. A pause. But the principle would work the same way as the unlinking spell Esther used on her children. You're severing a metaphysical bond. The architecture is similar, maybe not identical, but similar enough that the principle translates. The question is never whether the spell is theoretically possible. The question is what you channel it with. From across the room, Stefan says, the hybrids. His voice has the rough edge now, the first physical vocal symptom, not dramatic, just present. A quality of texture that was not there an hour ago. He is sitting on the couch. He decided to sit down approximately 20 minutes ago in a way that was not surrender and was not defeat, but was the acknowledgement of a body that is allocating its resources carefully. He is looking at nothing in particular and thinking at a very high velocity. They're all dying, Stefan says. The hybrids. Tyler is already gone. The others will follow if they're all dying at the same time. That's a massive amount of death energy, Bonnie finishes. On the phone, her voice is very quiet. Not frightened quiet, focused quiet, the voice of someone looking directly at something difficult. A dozen plus supernaturals expiring simultaneously within a few miles of each other. That's an enormous channeling source. She stops. Bonnie, Elena says, "That's dark magic, Elena." The words are not hesitant. Bonnie Bennett has always said the difficult things directly. It is one of the things Elena loves about her, and one of the things that makes her, when she is forced into impossible choices, someone you can actually trust to make them honestly. Channeling death energy, channeling the deaths of living creatures, that is not ancestral magic. It is not nature magic. It is not spirit sanctioned in any framework I have ever been trained in. The spirits will not help with this. I know. They won't just refuse. They'll actively... Bonnie, I know. Elena's voice is steady. It has been steady all night, which is not the same as being calm. Can you do it without them? The silence this time is longer. Caroline, standing in the doorway between the hall and the living room, watches Elena's face while she waits. She watches Elena hold the phone and hold her breath and hold the specific hope of someone who has put all of their remaining possibility into one basket and is waiting to hear whether the basket will hold. Then Bonnie says in a voice that is very quiet and very decided, the voice of someone who has already made the choice and is simply reporting the outcome. "Where's the old witch house?" He turns around when he hears the question. He looks at Elena. Elena looks back at him, and in the exchange, in the 2 seconds of silence before anyone moves, something passes between them that is not a conversation and does not need to be one. It is simply the acknowledgement from both directions of what is being asked and what it costs, and who is paying it. "I'll text her the address," Stefan says. Caroline watches all of this from the doorway. She watches Stefan slowly reaching for his phone. She watches Damon turning back to the window. She watches Elena hang up the call with Bonnie and stand for a moment in the kitchen alone with the decision she has just set in motion. Then she looks down at her own hands again. The shaking is less now. Not gone, present, but less urgent, as if the body has gotten used to the new terrain and is no longer surprised by it. The cold is steady. The cold is not worsening quickly, which is either because she has more time than Tyler did, because she is further down the chain, because the buffer of bloodline distance is real, or because she is not tracking the progression accurately, because she does not yet have enough experience of her own vampire physiology to know what subtle deterioration feels like from the inside. She has been a vampire for less than a year. She is still learning. She walks into the living room. She sits in the armchair across from Stefan. Neither of them says anything for a while. The boarding house is very quiet in the way it only is at 2 a.m, when the town is asleep and the supernatural machinery underneath is the only thing still running. Somewhere outside, the last effects of the homecoming dance are settling. The music will have stopped. The civilians will be driving home or already home. The decorations will be shifting in whatever wind is moving through Mystic Falls tonight. And 12 hybrids, distributed across the geography of this town, are dying in the dark. Alone or in groups, in houses and fields and the corners of buildings, dying the fast and violent death of creatures whose creator has been staked, and none of them know why, and none of them have anyone to call. And their deaths are the fuel for the spell that is the only thing standing between Stefan and Caroline, and Damon and the same end. Caroline looks at Stefan. Is Bonnie going to be okay? He does not look away. "I don't know," he says. It is the truest thing anyone has said all night. The Salvatore boarding house. Night. Hour 3.5. Elijah Mikaelson does not knock. This is not rudeness. Or rather, it is rudeness, but it is the specific kind of rudeness that functions as a statement, a declaration of position, a refusal to perform the social rituals of a situation he does not consider himself a guest in. A guest knocks. A witness does not knock. A man who has arrived to watch something happen on his own terms does not knock. Because knocking would imply that the people inside have the ability to deny him entry, and Elijah is operating tonight from a position of complete moral certainty that they do not. He finds the front door unlocked. They have been running in and out of it all evening, Elena to the car, Stefan to the porch, the constant movement of people managing a crisis that does not permit stillness. He walks through the unlocked door at 2:31 in the morning, and he stands in the living room of the Salvatore boarding house, and he does not say anything. He simply stands there and looks. The room presents him with an inventory. Elena Gilbert sitting on the edge of the couch near Stefan, her posture the posture of someone who has been holding herself together through sheer structural will for several hours. Stefan Salvatore on the couch itself. And this is the thing that Elijah registers first and most completely. Stefan on the couch, which Stefan does not do, which Stefan specifically does not do in crisis situations, because Stefan Salvatore is a pacer, a stander, a person who manages fear through motion. Stefan is on the couch because Stefan's body has made a decision about what it can currently sustain, and the decision is this, and the visible evidence of it is the gray that has moved from his temples down to his jaw. It is not dramatic gray. It is not the full desiccation that ends with a body on a floor. It is the early stage, the color leaching out of him the way color leaves old photographs, not suddenly but with the slow certainty of something that is committed to its direction. He looks, Elijah thinks, like someone has turned down the contrast. The form is intact. The presence is still there. But the vividness of him, the quality that makes Stefan Salvatore someone who fills a room even when he is trying not to, that is quieter than it should be. Stefan is looking back at Elijah. He does not look surprised. He does not look afraid. He looks like a man who has already completed the mental work of accepting what is coming, and who is therefore meeting Elijah's arrival not as a new threat to manage, but as one more piece of a very large and very terrible picture that he has already seen the full scope of. Damon is standing. Damon is always standing when he should be sitting. And this is not stubbornness, or it is stubbornness, but it is the specific stubbornness of a man who understands, at the cellular level, that the moment he sits down is the moment he concedes something he is not willing to concede. He is at the window. The gray on him is at his wrists, just the first suggestion of it, further behind Stefan in the progression, because wherever he falls in the bloodline chain, he falls further from Klaus than Stefan does, which means the buffer is slightly larger, which means he has slightly more time, which is not the same as having enough time. His hands are in his jacket pockets. He turned when Elijah walked in, and he is looking at him with an expression that is occupying the exact territory between defiance and guilt, and refusing to commit to either. Elijah looks at Damon for a long time. He looks at Damon the way you look at the specific person who has done the specific thing that cannot be undone. Not with rage. Elijah Mikaelson does not do rage. Not the hot, uncontrolled kind. Not the kind that arrives immediately and expresses itself immediately, and is therefore manageable and temporary. What Elijah has is colder and more durable. He is looking at Damon with the particular quality of a man who has just calculated a very long equation and is carrying the answer. He looks at the place where Klaus used to be in the world. This is the thing that nobody in this room will ever fully understand. Not Elena, not the Salvatores, not Caroline Forbes, not anyone who has lived one human lifetime, or even one vampire century. What it is to look at a space in the world where someone has existed for 1,000 years and find it simply empty. Klaus Mikaelson has been in Elijah's world since before there were words for what they were. The relationship between them has been everything. Loyalty and betrayal, and genuine love and genuine grievance, and a particular complicated bond of two people who have seen each other at their absolute worst and stayed anyway. Not because the worst was acceptable, but because the span of time they have shared makes the concept of leaving functionally meaningless. Where would Elijah go that Klaus was not also part of? When did the world begin without him in it? It began tonight. The world began tonight, at approximately 11:47 p.m., when Damon Salvatore closed the distance. Elijah stands in the living room of the Salvatore boarding house, and he looks at the space where Klaus used to be in the world, and finds it as he knew he would, as he has been finding it for the last 2.5 hours in every empty corner of every room he has moved through. Incomprehensibly empty, not sad empty, not the manageable emptiness of grief, the structural emptiness of a load-bearing wall that has been removed, the kind of empty that changes the architecture of everything around it whether the surrounding walls want to change or not. He grieves. He does it privately, completely, in the 3 seconds that he stands in the doorway before he speaks. He takes the grief in, he holds it. He does not allow it to be something that happens to him in front of people who do not have the standing to witness it. And then he puts it somewhere internal, somewhere that is his and not theirs, and he speaks. "I'm not going to kill you," Elijah says. His voice is perfectly level. Not controlled level, not managed level, genuinely level, the kind of level that takes 1,000 years to develop. The voice of a man who has separated his interior state from his exterior expression so completely that the exterior operates independently. "You're going to die regardless. I'm simply going to make sure someone with appropriate standing watches it happen." He moves to the armchair, the one that is angled toward the couch, toward Stefan, which gives him sightlines to everyone in the room, including Damon at the window. And he sits. He does not ask. He does not look at anyone for permission. He reaches for the bourbon on the side table. Damon's bourbon, a bottle that has been open all evening, and he pours himself a measure, and he does not acknowledge the presumption of this because he does not consider it presumption. Elena takes a step forward. It is not a large step. It is the instinctive step of someone who has spent 3 years managing supernatural threats through interpersonal negotiation, who has learned that the first 30 seconds of an encounter with an original is the window when the terms get set, and who understands that the terms Elijah has just announced are terms she needs to contest immediately or accept as established. Elijah raises one hand, not in the manner of a man asserting physical dominance. It is a traffic stop gesture, the hand of someone managing the approach of something that means well but is not welcome. The gesture of a man who understands what Elena is about to attempt and is declining it before she can make the attempt, not because he cannot handle it, but because he does not want to spend the energy. Miss Gilbert, his eyes move to her. They are not unkind. This is the thing about Elijah that has always distinguished him from every other supernatural threat Elena has encountered. His eyes are never unkind, not even now, not even here. He is not cruel. He is simply immovable. I understand the impulse. I understand that you are going to tell me that they had no choice, that the situation was impossible, that Damon acted in the only way the moment permitted, and that Klaus's bloodline is dying, and your people are dying, and this is not the time for whatever this is. He takes a measured drink. I understand all of that, and I am unmoved by it. I am not here to be moved. I am here to observe. He settles back in the chair. He looks at Stefan. He looks at Damon. He looks at the gray that is advancing slowly but certainly on both of them. I'm not going to kill you, he says again. Not a reassurance. A statement of position. Death by my hand would be a mercy compared to what is already in progress, and mercy is not what I'm in the business of distributing tonight. A pause. You should understand what I mean by that. He does not elaborate. He does not need to. Elena looks at Damon across the room. Damon looks back at her. He looks at Elijah. He looks at the bourbon that Elijah is drinking from his glass, and there is a moment, brief, almost invisible, where something moves across Damon's face that is not defiance, and not guilt, and not either of the things he has been performing since Elijah walked in. It is something rawer than either of those, something closer to understanding. He turns back to the window. Elijah settles into the armchair, with the specific quality of a man who intends to be there for a very long time. The Old Witch House. Night, hour 3.5. The Old Witch House smells like burnt wood and old magic in grams. Bonnie Bennett has always been able to separate these things. The burnt wood is physical, the smell of a building that has absorbed smoke across decades of cooking fires and candles, and the occasional controlled magical burn. The old magic is different, less nose and more skin. The particular ambient quality of a space that has been used for significant workings over a very long time, where the boundary between the ordinary physical world and the magical current underneath it has been worn thin by generations of intentional contact. And Graham's, Sheila Bennett, is different still. She is a warmth in the walls, a presence that is not quite sound and not quite light, but occupies some register that Bonnie's Bennett bloodline senses can access in a way that she has never been able to fully explain to someone who does not share that bloodline. Bonnie stands in the center of the room and calls out into the dark. She does not speak her grandmother's name. This is not how it works. Not here, not for Bonnie, not in this house. She simply opens the channel, the interior channel, the one that has been available to her since before she understood what it was, and she sends the calling outward the way you send a hand into the dark toward a face you know by touch. Graham's comes. Not physically. She has not come physically since the night she expended everything she had to seal the tomb beneath the church, the night the ancestral magic required more than she had, and she gave it anyway. And Bonnie carries the weight of that night in a part of herself that does not have a location but has a constant presence. She doesn't come physically, but she comes close. She comes into the warmth of the walls, into the particular quality of the room's darkness. And Bonnie can feel her the way you feel someone standing very close behind you in the dark, not visible, not audible, but unambiguously present. She is sad. Bonnie feels that immediately. Graham's is close and sad and sorry. Not sorry in the way of someone who has done something wrong, but sorry in the way of someone who is watching someone they love approach a line that cannot be uncrossed and cannot find a way to stop them. The spirits come with her. This is the thing about the ancestral Bennett power that Bonnie has spent her entire witch life navigating. Grams does not arrive alone. The ancestral mass, the accumulated weight and will of Bennett witches across generations, the vast collective that exists somewhere on the other side of the line between living and dead, and exerts its influence on this side through the bloodline. They arrive with her like weather arriving with a front. Bonnie feels them the way she always feels them, enormous, certain, and in possession of an agenda that they consider non-negotiable. Their voice when it comes is not a sound, it is a knowing. It arrives in Bonnie's chest like a chord struck on an instrument she cannot see. This is nature's course. This is balance. Klaus's death demands payment. Let the debt be collected. They're my friends, Bonnie says. She says it out loud. To an empty room in a house that smells like burnt wood and grams and old magic, alone with the dark and the weight of ancestral judgment, she says it out loud because saying it out loud is the only form of argument available to her in this register. The spirits do not respond to paperwork. They do not respond to contingency plans or extenuating circumstances, or the kinds of moral complexity that human beings use to justify the exceptions they make to rules they otherwise observe. The spirits respond to truth, stated plainly at the level of the bone. The bloodline is the consequence of the act. The spirit's response arrives in the same register as before, chest-deep, unambiguous, old as the mechanic of magic itself. You cannot shield them from consequence. Bonnie Bennett sits with this for exactly the amount of time she can afford. Watch me, she says. The spirits do not leave. She waits for them to leave. She expects them to leave, the way they leave when they have made their position known and there is nothing more to be said. She expects the withdrawal, the sense of the ancestral presence receding from her. They do not recede. They pull back. This is the distinction that matters, and the one that most people who have never stood in the current of ancestral magic would not understand. Pulling back is not the same as leaving. Leaving means gone, means the channel has closed, means the warmth in the walls has gone cold, means Bonnie is standing in an ordinary building with no access to anything larger than herself. Pulling back means staying, but stepping away from active engagement means they are not going to help, means they are not going to provide, not going to facilitate, not going to allow the ancestral current to run through the workings she is about to attempt. But they are staying to watch. Bonnie knows what this means. She has felt the quality of it before, in a different context and under different pressure. She has felt the moment when the spirits shift from warmth to warning, from the ambient encouragement of ancestral backup to the cold and present weight of ancestral disapproval. She has crossed this line before. She crossed it when she resurrected Jeremy, when she channeled more than she should have, when she made the decision that the people she loved outweighed the rules she had been taught to live inside, and the crossing of that line has always cost her. It has always left a mark. It has always changed something in the register of what she is, and what she can access, and what the magic feels like when she reaches for it. This will, too. She knows it. She is not pretending she doesn't know it. She crosses the room and she sits down on the floor, cross-legged, in the center of the room, the way she was taught, the way Grams taught her before Grams was gone, the position that opens the channel, that creates the physical configuration that the magic uses as a starting point. The floor of the old witch house is rough under her. The room is dark. The warmth in the walls, Grams' warmth, is still there, but it is laced now with something that reads as grief. And Bonnie acknowledges this privately and does not dwell on it because dwelling is not available to her right now. She closes her eyes. She reaches. Outward, past the walls of the house, past the property line, past the edge of the street. She reaches the way she has been trained to reach, the way every Bennett witch reaches when they are trying to locate something specific in the supernatural landscape of an area they know well. She reaches past Main Street, past the boarding house, past the school, past the edges of Mystic Falls proper, and into the spaces between the buildings and the trees, and the geography of a town that has more supernatural history per square foot than any other place she has ever stood. She is looking for the hybrids, specifically for the supernatural death signature of a creature that is dying, the specific resonance that a hybrid's expiring makes in the magical current, the signature that is neither fully werewolf nor fully vampire, but some third thing that Klaus's blood created, and the universe has been cataloging ever since. She is looking for 12 of them, expiring simultaneously in the dark. She finds them. The energy hits her like stepping into a current. This is the only way to describe it. Not a trickle, not a manageable flow, not the measured channeling she does when she is working within spirit-sanctioned boundaries, where the ancestral current carries its own governor, its own automatic regulator that keeps the power at a level she can process without damage. This is raw. This is 12 supernatural deaths worth of released energy, enormous and dark and hot, in a way that clean magic is not hot. Clean magic has a temperature that is simply present, simply ambient, neither warm nor cold in the way of things that are operating in their natural register. This is the heat of something forced, something unnatural, something that was supposed to live and does not live, and the energy of its ending is flooding into the space around it the way water floods a broken levee. Bonnie opens her channels. She gasps. It is not a clean feeling. That is the only honest assessment she can make of it in the moment. It is not clean. It is enormous, and it is more than she expected, and it settles into her with the specific quality of dark magic, which she has felt before and which she knows from experience does not simply pass through. Dark magic does not use you as a conduit and then dissipate. Dark magic settles. It finds the spaces between the things she is made of and it fills them, and once it has filled them, it does not empty out when the working is over. It becomes part of the furniture. It becomes something she will be managing, will be carrying, will be having conversations with herself about for a very long time after tonight. She knows this. She is holding this knowledge in one hand while she holds the enormous dark current in the other, and she is not letting either of them go. The energy is willing to be used. That is the other thing about dark magic. It does not have a conscience. It does not ask about intention or context or whether the person holding it has the spirit's blessing. It is simply power, stripped of everything that makes clean magic something other than a tool, and it will do whatever the witch directs it to do, with the same neutral efficiency that electricity runs through any wire capable of holding it. Bonnie starts to build. The spell architecture has been taking shape in her mind for the 40 minutes she spent driving across Mystic Falls with her phone on speaker, and Elena's voice in her ear and the shape of the problem clarifying as she moved toward the house where she knew she needed to be. Sireline bonds are not magical constructs in the ordinary sense. They are not spells that were cast and can therefore be counterspelled. They are natural bonds, woven into the fabric of supernatural existence the way gravity is woven into physics. You do not cut them so much as override them. You introduce a new anchor, an external one that has no connection to the original working, and you use that anchor to sever the metaphysical tether and reconnect the severed end to something that is not going to die. The Bennett bloodline is that anchor, ancient and powerful and completely outside Klaus's line. No Bennett was ever turned by Klaus or by anyone in his line, which means the Bennett magical connection is clean in the specific way this working requires. Bonnie does not have the knowledge to sever the sire line surgically, the way a witch with more time and more preparation and more specific architectural knowledge of Klaus's original bloodline working might do it. What Davina Claire will do in New Orleans years from now, in a version of the future that no longer exists, was surgical, precise, specific, targeted. What Bonnie Bennett is about to do is something different. She is going to burn through it. She is going to take the death energy of 12 hybrids, an amount of raw power so large it has no clean precedent in her experience, and she is going to force it through the Bennett bloodline and use it to overwhelm the sireline bond. Not sever it cleanly, but simply overpower it. Flood it with so much energy that the connection burns out, and the vampires on the other end are left standing on their own metaphysical foundation instead of the one Klaus built. Less precise, more dangerous. The kind of thing that can go wrong in 12 different directions that she cannot fully predict. The kind of thing that the spirits are watching from their pulled-back distance with the cold attention of people who have already said their piece and are now documenting the outcome. She says the words, older than her grimoire, which is already old enough to have outlasted 3 generations of Bennetts. These words are coming from somewhere that the dark magic has opened in her, some layer of ancestral memory that is not the spirit-sanctioned memory of the spirit's choosing, but the raw archive knowledge of the bloodline itself, stored somewhere below the level of conscious witchcraft, accessible only when the power is large enough to reach it. She is surprised by them. She says them anyway, because they are right in the way that the right words are right. She can feel the shape of them against the working she is building, the way a key feels right in a lock before it turns. She says the words. She holds the current. She holds the anchor. She holds her breath. In the walls around her, Grams is very close and very sad and very, very sorry. Okay, Bonnie says. To no one, to the empty room, to the dark and the warmth and the grief in the walls, and the cold ancestral judgment and the enormous hot darkness running through her channels, and the 12 deaths she is burning and the 4 people she is trying to reach across. The supernatural architecture of a 1,000-year bloodline. Okay. She opens her eyes. Let's go. Stefan goes quiet first. It is not dramatic. There is no final sentence, no reaching out, no moment where the conversation tapers into meaningful last words that frame everything that follows. Stefan Salvatore is not a man who would arrange his deterioration that way even if he could, because Stefan has spent 150 years refusing to perform his suffering for an audience, and that refusal holds even now. Even here, even when the audience is the people he loves most, and the performance would be forgiven and probably welcomed. He simply reaches a point, somewhere around 3:15 in the morning, where the mental effort of maintaining speech costs more than his body has left to spend on it. He stops talking, his eyes are open, his eyes are tracking, moving between Elena and Damon and the window, and the middle distance in the way that a conscious, present, functioning person's eyes move. He has not gone anywhere. He is still here, still in the room, still doing the math that he has been doing all evening in the deep interior, where the math has always lived in Stefan Salvatore. He has simply reached the point where the interior and the exterior have separated, where the mind is still running and the body has stopped cooperating with the mind's ambitions. And he has accepted this with the specific, deliberate equanimity of someone who made their peace with this outcome several hours ago and has been sitting inside that peace ever since. Elena is holding his hand. She has been holding it for 20 minutes, since the moment she looked at him on the couch and understood, without anyone telling her, that the time for standing at windows and monitoring phone calls had passed, and the time for simply being present had arrived. She is not crying. This is a decision, not a suppression. She has assessed the situation and determined that crying is not useful right now, that crying would mean accepting something she has not finished refusing. And Elena Gilbert has a long and well-documented history of refusing things that most people would consider done. She is watching his face. She watches every fluctuation in it, the moments when his eyes sharpen, when some piece of the interior mathematics produces a result, and the result registers briefly on the surface before going back under. She watches the gray at his jaw, which has not advanced in the last 20 minutes. This is the only number that matters to her right now. Not advancing. Not advancing is not the same as receding, is not the same as reversing, is not the same as fixed, but not advancing is the only data point available that is not terrible. And she is holding it the way you hold the one good piece of information in a room full of bad ones. Klaus Mikaelson has not moved in 40 minutes. He has been in the armchair since he sat down, and he has not moved and he has not spoken. The bourbon glass is empty. He has not refilled it. He sits with the specific quality of a man who has been still for 1,000 years in various configurations, who has stood in rooms while empires rose and fell, who has watched things he loved and things he despised with equal measured patience, who has the particular and terrible gift of the very old, the ability to wait without it costing him anything. Because waiting, for someone who has lived as long as Elijah has, is simply time, and time is the one resource he has never run short of. He watches Stefan, the thing on his face that Elena cannot name, that is not satisfaction and not grief, but some third thing with no clean label. It has been there since he sat down and it has not changed. Later, when she has the distance to think about it, she will decide that what she was looking at was witness. The act of witnessing in its fullest and most intentional sense, not observation, which is passive, which is predatory, but the ancient and deliberate act of being present to a significant event in a way that marks it as significant. Elijah is here so that what is happening here is witnessed, so that Klaus's death and its consequences are not events that occur in the dark without anyone of appropriate standing present to testify to them. He is the record. He is the 1,000-year-old record that will carry forward whatever happens in this room tonight. Damon is at the window. Damon has been at the window for most of the last hour, in the specific way he has been at windows for 150 years, using the glass and the dark beyond it as a surface that asks nothing of him, that does not require him to arrange his face into something presentable, or his posture into something that signals the correct emotional state. The window has always been where Damon goes when he is done performing. He goes there now and he does not perform. The gray is at his shoulders. It has moved up his arms in the last hour with the slow and certain progress of something that is not in a hurry because it does not need to hurry. It started at his wrists, that first suggestion that Elena saw when she looked at his hands at the boarding house kitchen table, and it has moved upward with the particular quality of things that move when you are not watching them. Not dramatically, not in visible increments. It simply advances between the moments when you are looking, so that each time someone looks at Damon's arms, the line is a little higher than it was last time, and there is no catching the movement in the act. His posture has changed. This is the thing that is harder to look at than the gray. Damon Salvatore does not have a normal posture because normal posture implies a baseline of ease that Damon has never inhabited. He holds himself the way people hold themselves when they are always ready for something. Slightly forward, slightly coiled, the body of someone who has never fully put down the expectation of being needed at speed. It is the posture of a man who has survived 150 years by staying ready. That is still there. It is still recognizably Damon's posture, but it has slowed. Not much, not enough to look like weakness, and Damon would not allow it to look like weakness, but enough to be visible to someone who knows what they are looking at. The movements have taken on a quality of molecular reluctance, as if each action requires a negotiation with his body that was not necessary an hour ago. As if the gray is not just a color but a resistance. As if his body is becoming very gradually and in a direction he cannot reverse through will alone, less certain about remaining entirely in the physical world. He is looking out at Mystic Falls. The town is dark at this hour. The civilian darkness that settles after the last bar is closed, and the last car has pulled into the last driveway, and the town has given itself over to the specific trust of sleep, the trust that tomorrow will arrive, that the ordinary machinery of the world will keep running. That morning is something you can count on. The sightlines from this window are the sightlines Damon has memorized over 150 years of standing at various windows and various configurations of this house. The tree line, the road, the edge of the property. He knows every inch of this view. He has watched it in all seasons and all weather and all hours, and the familiarity of it is not comforting tonight. It does not warm him, but it is true, and true is the best available thing right now, and he takes it. Elena comes to stand beside him at 3:22 in the morning. She crosses from the couch to the window without announcing it, without building up to it, without any of the conversational scaffolding that people sometimes build when they are approaching a difficult moment. She simply stands beside him. She looks out at the same dark town he is looking at. They stand there for a while without speaking, and the silence between them is not uncomfortable. It is the silence of two people who have been in proximity to each other for long enough that silence does not require explanation. If it doesn't work, Damon starts, it's going to work. He hears the certainty in it, and he knows the certainty is chosen, that Elena has constructed it deliberately the way you construct the things you need to survive the next hour. Not because they are certain, but because uncertainty is not survivable, and certainty, even the provisional kind, is. He knows this about her. He has always known this about her. Elena Gilbert's hope is not naivete. It is a decision she makes repeatedly and deliberately, under circumstances that would excuse giving it up. Elena, it's going to work, Damon. He looks at her. She looks back at him. In the window glass, faintly, he can see both of their reflections. Elena clear and present, himself less so, the gray at his shoulders visible even in the imperfect mirror of the night-dark glass. He sees it, and he sees her seeing it, and he makes the decision that she needs him to not finish the sentence. Not because he doesn't mean it. He means it completely. He has meant things like it before, and they have always been the truest things he has said. But because she is standing next to him at the window, and she has already given him the only response that matters, and he can still give her the choice to not hear the end of it. So he doesn't finish it. He takes her hand instead. His fingers close around hers, and she feels, immediately, the difference. Not the ordinary vampire cold that she has learned over the last 3 seasons to receive as simply his temperature, the baseline of Damon's skin that she can distinguish from human warmth without thinking about it anymore. This cold is different. This is the cold underneath the baseline. This is what his hand feels like when the body that usually maintains even the minimum of its supernatural warmth is being asked to allocate its remaining resources to something more pressing than surface temperature. She does not let go. Outside, in the dark, somewhere across the geography of Mystic Falls that neither of them can see from this window, the last hybrid dies. There is no sound when it happens. There is no signal, no supernatural marker, no event that either of them can identify in the moment. The last of Klaus's directly sired creatures, the 12 hybrids that Damon Salvatore walked past at the homecoming dance 3.5 hours ago, The creatures that Tyler Lockwood was one of. The creatures whose death energy Bonnie Bennett is burning on the floor of the old witch house right now. The last one expires, alone in the Mystic Falls dark, and does not make a sound that reaches the boarding house window. But Bonnie feels it. In the old witch house, the current shifts. Bonnie cannot feel her hands. This is not metaphor. It is not the numb distancing that happens when extreme cold or extreme emotion puts the body's periphery offline. She cannot feel her hands the way she cannot feel a part of herself that has been redistributed. Not gone, not absent, but no longer exclusively hers. The dark magic has been running through her channels for 40 minutes, and it has done what dark magic does, which is what it always does, which is settle. It has made itself comfortable in the spaces between the things she is made of. It has unpacked its belongings. It is no longer passing through her the way clean magic passes through, entering the channel, doing the work, exiting, leaving the conduit intact and undamaged. Dark magic does not pass through. Dark magic distributes. It finds the architecture of the witch it is running through, and it maps itself onto that architecture, and once mapped, it does not unmap. She can still cast. This is the part she is monitoring most carefully, because the functional capacity is what matters right now. The question of what the dark magic is doing to her interior geography is a question for later, for dawn, for the long and probably very difficult reckoning that is going to happen after the sun comes up. And Stefan is alive, and Damon is alive, and she is left alone with what she has put inside herself tonight. That reckoning is real. She is not pretending it is not real, but it is not now. Now she can still cast, and she is casting. The spell architecture has been building in her for 40 minutes. She has been holding it the way a structural engineer holds the weight distribution of a bridge in their head. Not as an abstraction, not as theory, but as a living and load-bearing construction that exists in the mind with all the pressure and consequence of something that exists in the physical world. She has been building it in layers, the way the most complex workings have to be built, because you cannot approach something like a sire-line bond with a single large action. You cannot simply strike it and expect it to break. It is not that kind of structure. It has been in place for hundreds of years, woven into the fabric of what Stefan and Damon and Caroline are at the most fundamental level of their supernatural existence. It is the reason they are vampires. It is the architecture underneath the architecture. Sire-line bonds are metaphysical tethers, not spells in the ordinary sense, not workings that were constructed with intention and can therefore be deconstructed with counter-intention, not curses that can be lifted by reversing the conditions of their casting. They are natural consequences of a specific kind of creation, the way gravity is a natural consequence of mass, not imposed, not constructed, simply true, woven into physics at a level below the point where physics can be argued with. You do not cut them, you do not reverse them, you override them. Bonnie is overriding them. The principles she is working with, the one she arrived at across 40 minutes of building while the dark energy settled into her, and the hybrid deaths fed the current and the spirits watched from their cold and pulled back distance, is anchor replacement. A sire-line bond is not simply a connection between a vampire and their original. It is a connection between a vampire and the continued existence of their original, between what they are and the supernatural fact of the thing that made them. Remove the original, and the connection has nowhere to go. And a metaphysical connection with nowhere to go does not simply stop. It unravels. It pulls apart the structure it was attached to. What Bonnie is doing is giving it somewhere to go. The Bennett bloodline is the new anchor. Ancient, powerful, completely outside Klaus's line in every direction. No Bennett was ever turned by any vampire in Klaus's bloodline, which means the Bennett magical architecture is clean in the specific sense this working requires. It has no prior claim, no existing relationship with the sire-line structure, no contamination from the bond she is trying to override. It is a neutral anchor point that the sire-line's unraveling energy can be redirected to, tied off to, stabilized against, so that the vampires at the other end of the severed connection are left standing on a new foundation rather than standing on nothing. This is not surgery. Davina Claire, years from now in New Orleans, will do surgery. She will approach the sire line with precise and specific knowledge of its architecture, will isolate the connections with the care and accuracy of someone who has mapped every inch of the structure she is working on, will sever each strand cleanly and leave the bloodline intact and the vampires alive. What Bonnie is doing is not that. Bonnie does not have the time for that, or the specific magical architecture of Klaus's bloodline mapping, or the regent-level ancestral access that would make that kind of precision possible. What Bonnie is doing is using a floodlight where Davina will use a scalpel. She is taking the death energy of 12 hybrids, an amount of raw power that has no precedent in anything she has ever channeled, and forcing it through the Bennett bloodline anchor with enough pressure to overwhelm the sire line bond entirely, to flood it, to inundate the connection between Stefan and Damon and Caroline and their dead original with so much energy that the bond cannot hold its shape against the current, and breaks in the direction she is pushing it toward the Bennett anchor, so that when it breaks they are attached to something living rather than attached to nothing. Less precise, more dangerous, more costly, in ways she is already feeling and in ways she will only begin to understand later, but possible. In the window of time they have, with the tools available, with the power she is holding, possible. She is aware that she is enjoying the size of it. This is the piece she cannot look at directly right now. The piece that she will be looking at very directly in the coming days. The awareness, sitting at the edge of her consciousness like something that arrived while she was busy with something else and has settled in the corner. That the dark energy running through her channels is not only tolerated, but welcomed in some register she does not want to name. That the magnitude of the power is producing in her something that feels uncomfortably like relief. Like, yes. Like, this is how much I needed, like the years of working within spirit-sanctioned limits, of always requesting and never taking, of channeling borrowed energy through approved channels, have produced in her a hunger she was not tracking, and the dark magic has found it and fed it, and she is going to be sitting with the implications of that for a very long time. She says the words. They arrive from below the level of her training, below the grimoires, below what Grams taught her in the way Grams taught her things, below the formal education of a Bennett witch who grew up in Mystic Falls with 1 foot in the ordinary world and 1 foot in the one underneath it. They arrive from the ancestral memory that the dark magic has opened, the deep archive that exists in the bloodline itself, not the curated version the spirits provide through proper ancestral channels, but the raw and unedited version, the version that contains everything the bloodline has ever known, regardless of whether the spirits would sanction it as knowledge worth having. She says the words and she feels them land in the architecture of the spell, and the landing is right in the way the right things are right. Not comfortable, not clean, but true. Structurally true. She can feel the working respond to them the way a lock responds to the correct key. Not gently, but with the specific click of mechanism engaging mechanism. She holds the current, she holds the anchor, she holds everything simultaneously. Because the one thing she cannot do is let any piece of this go before it is finished. The spell, the energy, the anchor, the direction of the break. They are all dependent on each other, and they all have to hold until the bond breaks in the correct direction. And the duration of that holding is measured not in seconds, she can count, but in the working's own internal logic. In the moment when the structure of the sire line bond reaches the point where the pressure of the current is greater than the bond's ability to maintain its shape, and the break happens and the energy follows the anchor she has built. She waits. In the walls around her, Grams is so close that Bonnie can almost hear her breathing. At the Salvatore boarding house, at 3:47 in the morning, Elijah Mikaelson sits forward in his chair for the first time since he sat down. It is not a large movement. It is the movement of a man who has felt something shift in the supernatural landscape he inhabits, who has, across 1,000 years of existence, developed the sensitivity to the world's underlying architecture that only the very old and the very aware develop, and who has just felt something change in that architecture in a way that is significant. His posture moves from settled to alert in the space of a breath, and he looks at the Salvatore brothers with an expression that is, for the first time since he walked in, not cold. The gray stops advancing on Damon's arms. This is the first thing Elena sees, and she sees it because she has been watching for it the way you watch for a specific star in a dark sky, with concentrated attention, with the exclusion of everything peripheral, with the total commitment of someone who has been promised nothing and is watching for any evidence that the promise was still worth making. The gray on Damon's shoulders, on his arms, at his wrists, it stops. It does not recede immediately. It simply stops advancing, which is the first moment in 4 hours that the direction of the inevitable has changed. It holds. 1 second. 2. Elena is not breathing. Neither is anyone else in the room. Even Elijah has gone very still, watching with that new expression, the one that is not cold, the one that might be, from a very long distance, through a very thick wall of grief and principle, something that looks like attention. Then the gray begins to reverse. It is slow at first. The same slowness as its advance, the same quality of movement that happens between the moments when you are watching, You look at Damon's wrists and the line is where it was. And then you look again and the line has moved. And you did not catch the movement, but the direction has definitively changed. The gray recedes from his wrists, recedes from his forearms. The color of him is returning, not rushing back, not flooding in, but returning with the steady and certain quality of something that belongs there and was only ever temporarily displaced. Caroline Forbes makes a sound. It is half gasp and half sob, and it is neither of those things fully. It is the sound of a physical sensation arriving unexpectedly, the sound of color flooding back into hands that have been cold and fading for 3 hours, the sound of the body recognizing suddenly and completely that the thing that has been advancing through it has stopped, has reversed, has been turned back at whatever line Bonnie Bennett drew in the old witch house on the other side of town. She looks at her hands, both hands. The gray is going, the cold is going, not quickly, not all at once, but going, the tide receding, the cellular certainty of the sire line's advance withdrawing back the way it came, and what is left in its wake is simply her, simply Caroline Forbes, returned to herself in the specific way that you are returned to yourself after something has been trying to take you apart. She puts her face in her hands. She does not cry. She holds her own face. On the couch, Stefan Salvatore takes a breath. His eyes sharpen first. The quality of focus returns to them the way resolution returns to an image when the lens adjusts, something moving from soft to clear in real time. He takes a breath, and the breath is different from the breaths he has been taking for the last hour. Different in the way that breathing is different when the body it is serving is returning to its full capacity rather than allocating everything to survival. He takes another breath. He grabs Elena's arm, not gently, not delicately, but with the grip of someone who needs to orient themselves to something solid and real, who needs the physical fact of another person to confirm that the present moment is what it appears to be. Elena grabs back, both hands around his arm. She holds on. Neither of them says anything. There are no words. What just happened in their bodies does not have a conversational register. It exists somewhere below language, in the cellular and supernatural architecture of what they are, and it is true and it is enormous, and it requires exactly nothing from either of them right now except this. Just this. The contact, the confirmation. Damon watches his own hands come back. He watches the gray leave his wrists, his palms, his fingers, watches the progression of the reversal from the outside, from the detached and careful attention of someone who has spent 150 years monitoring his own survival, and has learned to observe his own body with the same clinical distance he observes everything else. The gray goes from his fingertips to his knuckles, from his knuckles to his palms, from his palms up his wrists, receding, pulling back, taking with it the molecular reluctance that has been slowing him for the last hour, taking the cold that was deeper than his usual cold, taking the specific and terrible quality of a body that is running out of reasons to remain three-dimensional. His hands are simply his hands. He flexes them once. They work. He stands very still for a moment with this fact. He does not perform anything about it. He does not turn around immediately or speak or do anything at all except stand at the window and flex his hands and allow himself exactly one unobserved second of something that is not relief exactly, but is the first thing that has been allowed to exist in him all night, that is not fear or guilt or the managed performance of neither. Then he turns around. Elijah Mikaelson is already standing. He is on his feet in the way he was in his chair, without announcement, without transition, simply occupying the new position with the full weight of his presence. He is looking at Damon across the room. He is looking at Damon alive, at Damon intact, standing in the boarding house living room in the early hours of the morning with his hands ungrayed and his eyes clear and his posture returning to the familiar coiled readiness of a man who has decided, again, to be present in the world. The look on Elijah's face is not readable in any simple sense. It is layered in the way that a 1,000-year-old face is always layered. The surface, and then the depth beneath it, and then the depth beneath that, each stratum adding a different color to what is visible at the top. What is visible at the top is recognition. The recognition of a man who has just watched the consequence he came to witness fail to arrive. He does not speak. He stands. He looks. And the silence between him and Damon across the boarding house living room is a different silence than the one that has been occupying the room all night. The night's silence was the silence of waiting. This is the silence of what comes after waiting. The silence of two people who are both now fully present in the same moment and both fully aware of what the other one means. In the old witch house, Bonnie Bennett opens her eyes. Tyler Lockwood is dead. This is the first complete sentence Caroline Forbes produces when she can produce complete sentences again, and it is not an observation. It is not a piece of information she is delivering for the benefit of people who did not know. Everyone in this room knows. The sentence is an accusation, and it is aimed at no one in particular, because it is aimed at everyone responsible, which is everyone in the room in various and distributed ways, which means the room itself, which means the evening itself, which means the 3 seasons of decisions and choices and missed opportunities, and taken shortcuts that led to the specific moment when Damon Salvatore closed the distance at the homecoming dance, and the rest became consequence. Tyler Lockwood is dead, and he died on the kitchen floor of his mother's house, and he will not be coming back. There is no spell for what killed Tyler Lockwood. Bonnie's working severed the sire line curse from the living, from Stefan and Damon and Caroline and Catherine, from everyone in Klaus's bloodline who was still alive when the severance landed. But Tyler Lockwood was not alive when the severance landed. Tyler died at 1:31 in the morning, 16 minutes before Caroline drove away from the Lockwood estate. 45 minutes before the full scope of what was happening became clear to everyone at the boarding house. 3.5 hours before Bonnie said the words in the old witch house. Tyler died because he was a hybrid, because the wolf side of what he was had no buffer, no bloodline distance, no delay built into the mechanism of his connection to Klaus. He died first because of what he was, and what he was is what Klaus made him, and Klaus is dead, and none of that can be moved. Caroline is not asking anyone to fix it. She knows it cannot be fixed. What she is asking, the thing under the accusation, the actual need under the statement, is for someone in this room to sit with it, to not immediately convert Tyler's death into tactical context, into the background of the next problem, into the collateral damage assessment of the evening's operational mathematics, to let it be what it is, which is enormous and wrong, and a grief that Caroline Forbes is going to be carrying for a very long time. Nobody can. There are too many next crises. The world has already moved past the moment where sitting with Tyler's death was the available option, moved past it in real time while the sire line was killing everyone. And now it is 4:30 in the morning, and Klaus Mikaelson is standing in the living room, and Bonnie Bennett is somewhere across town in the old witch house, and the supernatural landscape of Mystic Falls has been permanently altered by what happened at 11:47 p.m., and the next crises are not theoretical. They are already here, already beginning, already demanding the attention that Tyler's death deserves and cannot have. Caroline knows this. She is the most functionally competent person in this room, and she knows this better than anyone. She says it anyway. She says Tyler Lockwood is dead, and she says it like an accusation, and she holds the room with it for as long as she can hold it, which is approximately 40 seconds, and then the room moves forward again, because it has to. And she lets it, and she will revisit this grief in private, in the way she has always revisited the things that cannot be publicly held for as long as they deserve. She moves to the armchair, and she sits down, and she begins to cry. Not loudly, not the kind of crying that asks for anything from the room. The contained, devastating, entirely private kind of crying that Caroline Forbes does when she has decided that the grief is too large to keep inside and too important to perform. The kind that happens with her face turned slightly away and her hands in her lap and her spine completely straight, because Caroline Forbes does not collapse, not even when she is breaking. The room around her keeps moving. The phone call from Catherine Pierce comes at 4:51 in the morning from a motel outside Atlanta, and it is not the call anyone expects from Catherine Pierce. Catherine is alive. This is the first and most important piece of the call, and it arrives in Elena's ear with the specific weight of information that was not certain until this moment. The sire line severance reached her. Bonnie's working. The brute force flood of hybrid death energy through the Bennett bloodline anchor. The working that will leave marks on Bonnie that none of them have fully accounted for yet. It reached Catherine Pierce in her Atlanta motel room, and it cut the chain. The biological clock that was trying to collect 5 centuries of suspended time all at once stopped when the sire line bond severed. It stopped at the point it had reached. Catherine had aged a decade by the time the severance landed. She is alive, and she is altered. The 5 centuries that the sire line curse managed to collect before Bonnie cut the chain have settled into her face and her voice and the quality of her presence in a way that cannot be reversed. The severance stopped the clock, but it did not rewind it. And Catherine Pierce has a decade she did not have at midnight written permanently into her now. She will heal from the acute damage. she will return to something like herself. But she will not look exactly like herself again, and Catherine Pierce, who has maintained a specific and carefully curated appearance across 5 centuries of survival, is going to spend some considerable time with the implications of this. She does not say thank you. She never says thank you. This is a structural feature of Catherine Pierce, not a character flaw. Gratitude requires a kind of vulnerability that she has not permitted herself since 1492, since the night she ran from the life she had and everything it cost her to run. What is in the call, if you are willing to read it generously, and Elena, who has known Catherine longer than she has understood what she knows about her, is something that functions as gratitude, a quality in the silences, a texture in the way she says Elena's name once, near the end of the call, without any sentence around it, just the name. Just that. She hangs up before the call becomes anything more than it is. Bonnie comes home at dawn. The door opens at 5:23 in the morning, and she walks in with the particular quality of movement that belongs to someone who has been through something significant and is navigating carefully and with full awareness. The experience of returning to ordinary space from extraordinary space. She is upright. She is present. She walks in under her own power, and she does not hold the door frame or ask for anything. Elena sees it immediately. It is in Bonnie's eyes. Not obvious. Not something that the other people in the room will see at first glance. Not something that announces itself. It is subtle in the way that the truest changes are subtle. In the way that the things that have happened below the surface always take a while to read correctly from the outside. Something in the quality of Bonnie's eyes is slightly wrong, slightly dark at the edges, as if the image has had its shadows pushed too far in the processing. The color is there, the recognition is there, the Bonnie is there, but the edges are dark in a way that was not dark before. The dark magic has not entirely left. Elena opens her mouth. Bonnie looks at her and shakes her head once. A small, specific movement that means, not now, not here, not in front of everyone, not with the full room watching, not with the conversation that this requires reduced to a hallway exchange while Stefan is recovering on the couch and Caroline is crying in the armchair. And Damon is standing at the window being Damon. Elena closes her mouth. Bonnie walks to the kitchen table and she sits down. She puts her hands flat on the table in front of her and she looks at them, both of them, palms down, fingers spread, looking at her own hands the way you look at something that is yours but has been changed. She looks at them with an expression that nobody in the room asks about. Not yet. They will ask about it. They will ask about it in the coming days and weeks and months, as the dark magic that settled in the channels of Bonnie Bennett tonight begins to make itself known through the texture of her castings, and the color of her power, and the specific ways in which the spirits, whose warning she overrode at the moment of the working, respond to her going forward. But not yet. At 5:23 in the morning, 2 hours after Stefan Salvatore took his first full breath and Damon Salvatore flexed his hands in the boarding house living room, they do not ask yet. Elijah stands in the doorway. He moved there at some point between Bonnie's arrival and the moment when the light outside the boarding house windows began its first, barely committed shift from full dark to the dark that is considering becoming morning. He is framed in the doorway with the specific quality of someone who has been watching and is now concluding his watch, not leaving immediately, not staying, occupying the threshold between the two, with the unhurried authority of a man who departs on his own schedule and no one else's. He is looking at Damon. Damon is at the window. He turns when he feels Elijah's attention. He has always been able to feel Elijah's attention the way you feel a change in atmospheric pressure, before the weather arrives, in the specific physical awareness of something significant moving toward you. He turns and he looks at Elijah in the doorway, and the look between them is the look of two people who have been in the same room all night and have said almost nothing to each other, and have said everything necessary in the silence. Damon alive. Damon intact. Damon standing in the morning light of the boarding house that should have been, by the logic of an uninterrupted sire line curse, his final sunrise. Klaus dead, the oldest and most feared creature in 1,000 years of supernatural history, reduced to ash on the Lockwood estate floor by a vampire who has been alive for 150 years and did not stop to think. Elijah takes him in. My brother is dead. They do not carry the theatrical weight that threats between supernatural creatures often carry. The deliberate pacing, the chosen register, the performance of danger, they are simply a statement of fact delivered in the level and certain voice of a man who has had hours to arrive at what he wants to say, and has arrived at exactly this. You should understand what that means. A pause. Not today. Not this week. I am not going to ask you to account for it today or this week. You have survived the night, and the night cost more than you intended, and I understand the arithmetic of unintended cost. I have been managing it for 1,000 years. The morning light is arriving in the gap behind him, just the first suggestion of it, the sky beginning its argument with the dark. But you should understand that there will be no version of this story where that ends cleanly. Not for you, not for anyone in this house. Klaus Mikaelson is dead and Elijah Mikaelson is alive, and I have 1,000 years of practice at the particular patience that allows for the long view. He lets this sit for exactly the right amount of time. Take the time you need. Rest. Grieve your losses. Tend to your witch. He looks briefly at Bonnie at the kitchen table. Something in his face acknowledges what she did tonight, not with warmth, not with anything that could be called appreciation, but with the specific recognition of someone who understands the magnitude of a working, and cannot fully withhold that recognition even from someone he has no reason to favor. Then he looks back at Damon. When the time comes, Elijah says, and it will come, you will know. He pulls the boarding house door closed behind him with the same quiet precision he brought to every other action of the evening, and the sound of it closing is no different from any other door closing at any other moment. And somehow this is the most frightening thing about it, that it is ordinary, that Elijah Mikaelson's declaration of a permanent and patient reckoning sounds exactly like a door closing on a quiet morning. The room holds the silence for a long moment. Damon watches the door. He thinks about the white oak steak in his hand at the homecoming dance, about the 3 seconds the moment gave him, and the decision he made in them, and the quality of that decision, the way it felt exactly right, exactly correct, the deep and bone-level satisfaction of removing a threat he has been calculating the cost of for 3 years. He thinks about Klaus burning from the inside out. He thinks about doing it again. And he would do it again. This is the honest assessment, the one he will not say out loud, but will carry as truth. He would do it again. And then he thinks about Tyler Lockwood. He thinks about Tyler on the Lockwood kitchen floor, which he has not seen but which exists in his mind with complete and specific clarity, assembled from what Caroline said and what the sireline mechanics dictated, and the simple fact of who Tyler was and how Tyler died. He thinks about Bonnie at the kitchen table with her hands flat and her eyes wrong. He thinks about Stefan's gray face at 3 a.m. and the way Stefan's eyes softened when they came back. The specific, private relief of someone who had already accepted death and is learning, in real time, that it has been withdrawn. He thinks about what Elijah said, not for you, not for anyone in this house, not regret. He runs the internal assessment and arrives, honestly, at not regret. Regret would require the belief that the choice was wrong, and he does not believe the choice was wrong. Klaus is dead. Klaus was 1,000 years of active harm to everyone in his orbit, and Klaus being dead is the correct state of the universe. But something adjacent to regret, which is the understanding that every choice has a total cost, and the total cost is not always visible at the moment of the choice, and the cost of this particular choice is going to keep being tallied long after tonight. Tyler, Bonnie, Elijah, the declaration of permanent patient war from a man who has 1,000 years of practice at patience. The dark edges in Bonnie's eyes that Elena is watching from across the kitchen, with the specific worry of someone who has already begun managing a new problem. The tally is not complete. The tally may never be complete. He carries this. He holds it in the place where honest things live in Damon Salvatore, which is not the surface, never the surface, but is real and is present and does not require expression to exist. Now what? She is standing in the kitchen doorway between the two rooms. The living room where Stefan is sitting upright on the couch with the color slowly returning to him, and the kitchen where Bonnie is at the table with her flat hands and her wrong edges, and the dawn coming through the window behind her. Elena is standing in between, which is where Elena Gilbert has always stood, in the threshold, in the gap between the thing that happened and the thing that comes next, holding both. Damon turns around. The boarding house is full of people who almost died tonight. This is the inventory he takes as he turns. Stefan on the couch and the recovery still visible in him, the rebuilding of the ordinary color and solidity of Stefan Salvatore, happening in real time as the severed sire line and the Bennett anchor do whatever they are going to do going forward, and the body returns, incrementally, to itself. Caroline in the armchair with her crying, contained and devastating and private in the way only Caroline's grief is private. The grief of someone who does not ask anyone to witness it, but who is going to carry it correctly, who is going to honor Tyler by carrying it correctly and not setting it down before it has been fully held. Bonnie at the kitchen table, staring at her hands, not moving. The question of what is in Bonnie Bennett's channels tonight, what has distributed itself through the architecture of the most powerful witch in Mystic Falls, is a question that will not be answerable for some time, and the answer when it arrives will require everyone in this room to be paying attention. Alaric Saltzman on the second couch, because of course Alaric is on the second couch, because Alaric has always occupied the position of the person who is present and useful, and then sidelined by the specific physics of supernatural crisis that eventually outpaces the humans who keep signing up to manage it. He is asleep. He has been asleep for the last 40 minutes, having spent the previous 5 hours being as useful as he could be, and then hitting the wall that humans hit. And the particular mercy of his unconsciousness is that he missed Elijah's departure and its specific cold weight, which he would have had opinions about that nobody has the energy for right now. This is the room. These are the people. Now, Damon says, we deal with Elijah. He walks to the couch, he sits down. This is the concession he makes. The sitting down, the deliberate release of the standing at the window posture, the acknowledgement that the night of the standing is over and something else has begun. After coffee, the room breathes. Stefan looks at Damon. There is a long moment between them, the kind of moment that only exists between people who have been brothers for 150 years and who have, in the last 8 hours, come closer than they have come in decades to losing each other to something that could not be fought. There is no conversation in it. There is simply the recognition from both directions of what they are, imperfect and costly and occasionally catastrophic in ways that the other person has to live with, but present. Still present. Returned to the present by Bonnie Bennett's dark magic and the death energy of 12 hybrids and whatever Bonnie is going to be carrying going forward because she made the choice she made. Stefan says, make it strong. Damon does not smile. He almost smiles. In the space between what he does and what he almost does there is 150 years of brotherhood, that both of them are alive to still be inside. In the kitchen, Elena puts the coffee on. Through the boarding house windows, the dawn is arriving over Mystic Falls. Not dramatically, not the golden cinematic sunrise of something ending, and something beginning in equal balanced measure. It is a gray and ordinary dawn, the kind that most mornings are, the kind that does not announce itself as significant, the kind of dawn that comes up over a town that has been through something enormous in the night and is now doing what towns do, continuing, persisting, opening its eyes onto a world that is not the world it closed them on. Klaus Mikaelson is dead. His hybrids are dead. 12 creatures he made with his blood distributed across the geography of Mystic Falls are expiring in the dark, already expiring, already done with their expiring, already the former inhabitants of the dark corners where the night found them. The hybrid army is gone. The directly sired supernatural force that Klaus has been building since he broke his curse is gone with it. Tyler Lockwood is gone. In New Orleans, a city Klaus Mikaelson will now never return to, there is a woman named Haley Marshall who does not know that the hybrid who would have been her child's father is Ash, on a Lockwood estate floor in Virginia. There is a child who will not be born. A child who would have been the first hybrid baby, the miracle of Klaus's bloodline and a werewolf's humanity combined. The child who would have been named Hope because she was one. She will not be born. She will not grow up to be the protagonist of a story that spans continents and decades. She will not exist. The space where she would have been in the world is simply empty, and the world does not know what it is missing, and the world will not know. And this is one of the costs that does not appear in any tally. Rebecca Mikaelson, somewhere, daggered or wandering, or simply existing in the way that very old and very powerful things exist when the central gravity of their family has been removed, is free of her controlling variable in a way she has spent centuries wanting and may not know how to survive. Without Klaus managing her with his daggers and his manipulation and his particular brand of family obligation, Rebecca is loose, ancient and powerful and untethered. The story she would have had in Mystic Falls in the months to come, the story of grudging alliance and complicated humanity, and the long journey toward choosing to be something other than what she was made. That story has no center now. It will find a different shape. What shape it finds is not yet knowable. The original family will not reunite the way it would have reunited. Cole's chaos, the Mikaelson siblings and their various configurations of love and rage and thousand-year grievance, all of it bends differently now, without Klaus as the pole around which it orbited. Elijah is the gravity now, and Elijah's gravity is colder and more principled and more patient, and in some ways more dangerous, because Klaus at his worst was spectacular, and spectacle can be planned around. Elijah is not spectacular. Elijah simply moves, and when he arrives, he has already been thinking for longer than anyone else in the room, and the declaration he made in the boarding house doorway at dawn is not a threat he will forget. Silas is still sleeping under a distant body of water, waiting. The story that would have pulled him out, the story that ran through S4 and S5, that used the sire line problem as one of its structural elements, that required Klaus's continued existence as one of its moving parts. That story is restructured now. The pieces that will lead to Silas's awakening are still in place, or some of them are, but they are arranged differently. And the world Silas wakes into when he finally wakes will be a world that has no original hybrid, no sire line intact, no power structure that resembles the one he has been sleeping through. In Mystic Falls, the sun comes up. At the kitchen table, Bonnie Bennett lifts her hands off the table and holds them in front of her face, and looks at them in the morning light coming through the window. They look like her hands. They are her hands. But the magic that lives in them, the magic she has been born to, trained in, stretched by and tested by and almost broken by, across 3 years of Mystic Falls supernatural crisis, it is different this morning than it was last night. Not smaller, not weaker, different in the way that fire is different after you have fed it something it should not have eaten. Still fire, still hers, but burning in a register that she is going to need time and honesty and possibly help she has not yet asked for to fully understand. She puts her hands back on the table. Elena sets a cup of coffee in front of her without saying anything. Bonnie looks at it, then she looks at Elena. The look between them is the look of two people who have been best friends long enough to conduct entire conversations without speaking. And the conversation they are conducting right now is long and complicated. And they are both aware that it is only the first sentence of something much longer. Not today. Today is coffee and survival, and the specific work of being present in a morning that none of them were certain they would reach. Stefan takes the coffee Damon hands him, and he holds it in both hands, and he drinks it, and he does not talk about Elijah, or about what comes next, or about the cost of what happened last night and the full accounting of its costs. He drinks his coffee in the early light of the boarding house living room, and he is alive, and the coffee is hot, and these two things together are, for right now, enough. Damon is on the couch. For once, he is on the couch, not at the window, not standing, not performing his own readiness for whatever comes next. He is sitting with his coffee, and the morning is arriving outside the windows, and he is letting it arrive. He is thinking about Elijah, not with fear. Damon Salvatore does not fear things in the way that most people fear things. Fear for him has always been adjacent to attention. The heightened awareness of a threat that is worth taking seriously, the sharpening of focus that comes when you understand the weight of what is moving toward you. He is attending to Elijah. He is taking the full measure of what Elijah said in the doorway and carrying it with the seriousness it deserves, which is considerable. There will be no version of this story where that ends cleanly. He knows this. He knew it the moment the stake went in. He knew it not consciously, not as a clearly formed thought, but in the way the body knows the weight of a thing before the mind has found the words for it. He knew that killing Klaus would not be a clean ending. He knew that the vacuum left by 1,000 years of active presence is not a comfortable space to stand in. He knew all of this, and he did it anyway, and he would do it again. But he is sitting on the couch in the morning light with the tally still running. And the tally includes Tyler Lockwood's body and Bonnie's dark edges, and Elijah's patient declaration, and everything that has not yet happened that the night has set in motion. And he is sitting with all of it, not pretending it is resolved, not performing anything about it, just sitting with it. Now what? Elena had asked. Now Bonnie's recovery and whatever it requires. Now Caroline's grief, which will outlast everything tactical that the night produced, and which deserves more than the room could give it at 4:30 in the morning, with the next crises pressing in. Now the supernatural power vacuum that Klaus's death has created in the broader world, every vampire faction, every supernatural power player who has been living under Klaus's dominion or in fear of his wrath, every creature that has been holding its position because Klaus's position was fixed. They are already moving. They have been moving since 11:47 p.m. Mystic Falls is the place where the most feared creature in supernatural history was killed, and the world knows, and the world is deciding what to do about that, and the Salvatores are the people who live in that place. The thematic thesis, the thing the night has made legible in the bodies of everyone in this room. The most dangerous thing in the TVD universe was never Klaus. It was the vacuum he would leave behind. Klaus was a contained disaster. Terrible, yes. Costly, yes. But contained, his motivations were knowable, his patterns were mappable, his priorities were legible to people who had spent enough time inside his orbit. You could plan around Klaus. You could, with sufficient preparation and sufficient sacrifice and sufficient luck, manage Klaus. The show spent 3 seasons demonstrating that this was possible. The vacuum is not manageable. The vacuum is not contained. The vacuum is what fills the space when the thing that was filling it is gone, and it fills that space with everything that was being held back by Klaus's existence, every power that deferred to him, every faction that yielded to him, every creature that stayed in its lane because the cost of not staying in its lane was Klaus himself. All of that is loose now. All of that is in motion. All of that is heading in various configurations of speed and intention toward the space where Klaus used to be. And Damon Salvatore is the person who created the space. He knows this. He is sitting with his coffee in the morning light, and he knows this completely, and he is not collapsing under it, is not performing guilt he doesn't entirely feel, is not pretending the calculation came out wrong when at its core he does not believe the calculation came out wrong. He is simply carrying the total cost with both hands, including the parts that are still arriving, including the parts that have not arrived yet, including the parts that will take years to fully understand. He drinks his coffee. Outside the boarding house windows, Mystic Falls continues. The streamers from the homecoming dance are still visible on the Lockwood Estate lawn from the right angle, though no one in the boarding house is at the right angle to see them. The town is waking up. The civilians are beginning their morning routines, coffee and news, and the ordinary machinery of lives that do not know what happened in their town last night and will not know, because this is how Mystic Falls has always worked. The supernatural machinery running underneath the ordinary surface, the catastrophes absorbed into the institutional memory of a place that has been absorbing them for long enough to have developed a kind of structural tolerance. But underneath the ordinary surface, the machinery has changed. The sire line that connected Stefan and Damon and Caroline to Klaus's continued existence has been severed and replaced with a Bennett anchor, which means they are now connected to something else, something that will require understanding, that will have implications none of them have fully mapped. That is one more consequence in the running tally. The dark magic that Bonnie burned through her channels tonight is settling into its new home in the architecture of the most powerful witch Mystic Falls has produced in a generation. And what it does there is not yet known. Elijah Mikaelson is somewhere in the world, moving in his particular patient way toward whatever the long view requires him to move toward. Rebecca is loose. The supernatural world is rearranging itself around an absence. And in the kitchen of the Salvatore boarding house, at 5:47 in the morning, on the day after the night that changed everything, Bonnie Bennett is looking at her hands in the morning light. They look like her hands. But the shadows have been pushed too far.